If your grocery bill has started feeling unpredictable, that is not because you suddenly forgot how to shop. It is not a discipline problem, and it is not just bad luck. Grocery stores are built to hide price pressure until it becomes hard to ignore, and by the time most people notice it, they are already paying more for the same cart. That is why some items matter more than others. During periods of economic pressure, prices do not rise evenly. They usually move in a pattern. A few categories jump first. They are the warning lights. They show you where supply chains are strained, where stores can push margins, and where ordinary shoppers tend to overpay simply because the habit feels normal. The households that stay calmer are not guessing. They recognize which foods become unstable first, and they adjust before the checkout total starts doing the talking for them. And once you see the pattern, it becomes hard to unsee. The foods that hold their value best tend to share the same traits. They last longer. They create less waste. They work across more than one meal. They fill people up. And they cost less per serving than the polished versions sold at eye level. So let's go through the grocery items that usually get expensive first, and what gives you more control instead. Beef is often one of the first places shoppers feel pressure, even before they can explain why the total feels off. You go in for a familiar pack of ground beef, maybe steaks for the weekend, and suddenly the number on the label looks like it belongs to a different decade. There is a reason for that. Beef is one of the most resource-intensive foods in the store. It depends on feed, fuel, land, transport, refrigeration, labor, and time. Cattle take much longer to raise than chickens, which means every disruption has more time to work its way into the final price. If feed costs rise, if drought affects supply, if fuel jumps, beef reacts fast. And because many households still see beef as the default center of the meal, stores know demand stays relatively loyal, even when the price climbs. That is where the damage happens. A meal built around beef can easily cost 2 to 3 times more per serving than one built around beans, and often noticeably more than one built around chicken. A pound of ground beef might run $5 to $8 in many areas, while dried beans can come in well under $2 per pound and still stretch across several meals. The smarter move is not to think in terms of replacement. Think in terms of function. If you need protein, beans do the job. If you need flexibility, chicken does the job. Beans are especially useful because they store for months, sometimes years, with almost no waste. Chicken, especially when bought on sale or frozen, gives you more stability than beef without turning dinner into a project. And once you stop treating beef as automatic, you stop letting one of the most volatile items in the store control your total. Fresh fish is another category that gets expensive quickly, and sometimes quietly enough that people do not notice until they are already cutting it out. It carries a premium image, but often what you are really paying for is fragility. Fresh fish depends heavily on transport, timing, and temperature control. It has a short shelf life, limited room for delay, and a chain of handling that leaves almost no margin for disruption. If fuel costs rise, if shipping tightens, if weather affects catch volume, prices can move almost immediately. And then there is waste. Stores know fresh seafood is risky inventory. If it does not sell in time, it cannot just sit there another week. That spoilage risk gets built into the price before you ever touch it. This is why a piece of fresh salmon or cod can feel reasonable one month and strangely expensive the next. In many cases, canned fish gives you a more stable option without the same exposure to transport swings and spoilage loss. Tuna, sardines, salmon, even canned mackerel often cost far less per serving and last dramatically longer. There is also a hidden benefit here. Canned fish is already portioned, already cooked in many cases, and easy to work into lunches, salads, pasta, or sandwiches. That means less waste at home too, and for households trying to keep protein options open, that flexibility matters. Fresh fish has its place. But if the goal is control, canned fish behaves much better under pressure. Fresh vegetables are where many people think they are making the safest choice, but this category can get expensive faster than it appears. A bag of salad greens, a few peppers, some broccoli, a box of berries on the side, and the cart still looks modest. Then the total says otherwise. Fresh produce is highly sensitive to weather, season, transport, and shelf life. If one region has a bad growing season, prices rise. If trucking becomes more expensive, prices rise. If stores expect spoilage, prices rise again. And because fresh vegetables often look healthier and more responsible in the cart, people are less likely to question the markup. But this is where appearance and value split apart. Fresh vegetables are often one of the highest waste categories in the average household. A bag of spinach bought with good intentions can become a small science experiment in the crisper drawer by Thursday. That is money leaving the house without ever becoming a meal. Frozen vegetables solve several problems at once. They are usually picked and packed at peak season, they keep for months, and they let you use exactly what you need. No guilt, no wilted leftovers, no buying the same ingredients twice because the first batch spoiled before you got to it. The price difference can be meaningful too. Out of season, fresh vegetables can cost 30 to 100% more than frozen equivalents, especially for items like broccoli, peas, mixed vegetables, or spinach. And frozen often gives you the part you actually eat, not stems, bruises, or trim loss. This is one of the clearest examples of how stores profit from aspiration. Frozen vegetables do not look romantic, they just work. And under inflation pressure, foods that simply work tend to protect your money better. Prepackaged meals are where convenience becomes expensive in a way that is almost too easy to miss. A frozen dinner, boxed pasta skillet, heat and eat tray, or refrigerated family meal does not seem outrageous by itself. But category by category, this is where a lot of grocery money disappears. These products rise quickly because you are not paying only for food. You are paying for processing, branding, packaging, factory labor, marketing, freezer space, and the promise that you do not have to think. When costs rise anywhere along that chain, the final price has plenty of room to move. And here is the part that makes stores love these products. Shoppers compare them to restaurant prices, not to raw ingredients. So a $9 pre-made meal can feel reasonable because takeout would cost more, even if a simple home-cooked version would cost $3 or $4 for the same number of servings. That gap gets worse during inflation. The convenience premium expands because people are tired, busy, and less likely to resist small increases on familiar items. The practical alternative is not gourmet cooking. It is simpler than that. Basic ingredients: rice, pasta, beans, frozen vegetables, chicken, canned tomatoes, potatoes, eggs when priced reasonably. Meals built from components tend to hold their cost structure far better than meals sold in a tray. And once you notice how often convenience food is really packaging with a food attachment, it becomes much easier to step around it. Snack foods may not look like the main problem, but they are often one of the fastest ways grocery inflation sneaks into the house. A bag of chips here, crackers there, cookies, bars, flavored nuts, little extras for the evening. Individually, they seem harmless. Together, they can quietly take over a large share of the bill. This category is highly inflation-sensitive because it is built on low-cost ingredients sold at very high margins. A bag of chips is mostly potatoes, oil, air, and branding. Yet the price can jump 20% or more with very little resistance because people are buying the habit, not just the ingredients. And snack foods are masters of shrinkflation. The bag gets smaller, the package stays familiar. The price nudges up anyway. Suddenly, you are paying more for less, and it barely registers until it becomes routine. This is also one of the easiest places to regain control, because the alternatives are often hiding in plain sight. Popcorn kernels cost a fraction of packaged snack bags and make a surprising amount. Oats can become filling snacks or quick breakfasts. Peanuts, store-brand crackers, toast with peanut butter, yogurt when priced well, even simple fruit in the right season can cover the same need without carrying the same markup. A useful question here is not, what do I feel like buying? It is, what am I actually paying for? If the answer is mostly seasoning, packaging, and marketing, that product is probably more fragile than it looks. And by this point, you are probably noticing a pattern. How many of these items are expensive because of the food itself? And how many are expensive because of everything wrapped around it? That is the key shift. The more layers a product has, the more chances there are for pricing pressure to reach you. The smarter grocery foundation usually looks less polished, less advertised, and a little less exciting in the aisle. But it behaves better. It lasts longer, wastes less, and gives you more uses before it asks for more money. That matters even more in the next category. Brand name products are one of the easiest ways households overpay without realizing it. Not because the products are always bad, and not because store brands are always identical, but because branding gives stores a convenient place to preserve margin while shoppers stay loyal to habit. When economic pressure builds, national brands often hold their price higher, for longer, or they shrink the package while maintaining the same shelf presence. In some categories, the difference between brand name and store brand can be 15 to 40%, sometimes more. And for what exactly? In many pantry categories, the ingredient list is nearly the same: flour, sugar, canned beans, pasta, oats, frozen vegetables, peanut butter, basic cereal. Even some dairy products often come from similar supply systems with different labels and advertising budgets attached. The quiet trick is familiarity. Stores know people reach for what they recognize, especially when they are tired or shopping on autopilot. That makes brand loyalty expensive during inflation because the product does not have to improve. It only has to feel safe. A useful strategy is selective loyalty. Keep the few products where quality genuinely matters to you. But test store brands in the basic categories first, where the risk is low and the financial difference accumulates. Saving 80 cents once is forgettable. Doing it across 10 or 15 items every week is not. This is not about denying yourself good products. It is about making sure you are paying for food, not a logo. Milk is one of those staples people assume will stay steady because it feels essential. But dairy can become unstable faster than expected. It depends on feed, transport, refrigeration, and short shelf life. When costs rise across energy and supply chains, milk does not have much room to hide. And because households buy it regularly, even a modest increase adds up quickly. An extra dollar on a gallon may not sound severe, but over a month, especially in larger households, it becomes one more recurring charge that quietly hardens the grocery routine. This is where powdered milk becomes surprisingly useful, not necessarily as a full-time replacement, but as backup control. It stores for a long time, takes up less space, and can cover baking, cooking, emergency use, and even daily drinking if needed. That means fewer rush trips to the store and less pressure to pay whatever the refrigerated case is asking that week. It also helps reduce waste. Fresh milk has a deadline. Powdered milk waits. For households that use dairy inconsistently, that difference matters. Even if you still prefer regular milk, having powdered milk in the pantry changes your position. You are no longer forced into buying on the store's schedule. And anytime you can reduce urgency, you reduce the store's power over your money. Bread feels basic, almost too ordinary to worry about, which is exactly why rising bread prices catch people off guard. It is one of those products that slips into the cart automatically. A loaf here, another halfway through the week, maybe rolls, buns, wraps, something extra. Because each purchase seems small, the total rarely gets much scrutiny. But bread is more exposed than it looks. Wheat prices can move. Fuel costs affect delivery. Commercial baking adds labor, packaging, and distribution. Fresh bread also has a short useful life in many homes. Once it goes stale or moldy, the value disappears fast. And there is a second problem. Many people pay a premium for bread products that are mostly convenience and branding again. Artisan labels, health halos, seeded blends, thin-sliced versions, sandwich rounds. The shelf turns into a museum of inflated markups. Flour, by contrast, is one of the simplest control tools in the store. It is shelf-stable, flexible, and dramatically cheaper per serving than finished bread. Even basic home baking can produce loaves, flatbreads, pancakes, biscuits, or pizza dough for a fraction of the cost of constantly buying ready-made versions. This does not mean everyone needs to become a dedicated baker with a romantic relationship to sourdough. It means understanding that one inexpensive bag of flour can cover multiple categories that stores prefer to sell separately at a premium. And that kind of flexibility is exactly what inflation does not want you to notice. Cooking oils are one of the least exciting items in the store, which is why price jumps here can be so frustrating. No one feels pleased about buying oil. It is just something the kitchen needs. But when supply pressure hits, oils can move quickly and noticeably. This category is vulnerable because it sits close to global commodity markets. Weather, crop disease, export restrictions, war, fuel costs, and processing capacity can all affect prices. And unlike some foods, oil is hard to improvise around if you cook regularly. Once households need it, they need it. That creates a familiar pattern. Stores know demand is steady. Shoppers delay replacing it until suddenly they are almost out. Then they pay whatever the shelf says because dinner depends on it. That is why oil is one of the few categories where a small amount of advanced planning makes sense. Not hoarding, just awareness. If you use olive oil, canola oil, vegetable oil, or another standard cooking fat regularly, buying an extra bottle when prices are normal can protect you from the worst timing. Especially because oils stored properly usually last long enough to make that practical. You can also watch unit pricing here. Premium packaging, spray formats, infused versions, and niche labels often push the cost far above what the actual oil justifies. A plain, reliable bottle usually gives you more control than the prettier option with better font choices. Sometimes the most expensive grocery decisions happen in the most boring aisle. Eggs may be the best example of a food people assume is stable until it suddenly is not. One week they feel almost too cheap to think about. The next, the price has doubled, cartons are limited, and everyone is staring at the shelf as if the hens joined a hedge fund. Egg prices are unusually volatile because the supply chain is vulnerable to disease outbreaks, feed costs, energy costs, and production disruptions. It does not take much to create rapid swings, and when eggs become a headline item, stores know shoppers are watching. That attention can make every increase feel even sharper. The reason this matters is that eggs sit in multiple roles at once: breakfast food, baking ingredient, protein source, quick dinner, binder, backup meal. So when the price rises, households feel it across more than one part of the kitchen. That is why it helps to have alternatives ready before prices jump. For breakfast, oats, yogurt, or peanut butter toast can fill the same practical role depending on pricing. For baking, products like applesauce, mashed banana, or simple commercial egg substitutes can work in some recipes. For protein, beans, canned fish, and chicken often provide better price stability. The goal is not to stop buying eggs forever. It is to avoid being cornered by a category known for dramatic swings. Once you have options, you can buy eggs when the price makes sense and step back when it does not. And that may be the most important habit in this entire system. Because the real issue is not just inflation, it is timing. Most people react after the increase is obvious. They notice it when the bill is already painful, when favorite items have become hard to justify, when the cart feels smaller and somehow heavier at the same time. But the earlier signals are usually there. They show up first in foods that are perishable, heavily transported, highly processed, brand-driven, or tied to volatile supply chains. Beef, fresh fish, fresh vegetables, prepackaged meals, snack foods, brand names, milk, bread, cooking oils, eggs. Different products, same pattern. The more a food depends on freshness, convenience, branding, or fragile logistics, the more exposed your money tends to be. The foods that protect you best usually have longer shelf life, lower waste, more than one use, and a lower cost per serving. They are less exciting. They are also less likely to ambush you. That does not mean your grocery cart has to become joyless or extreme. It means building more of it around foods that behave predictably. Beans instead of always defaulting to beef. Canned fish instead of relying on fresh. Frozen vegetables instead of watching produce spoil. Basic ingredients instead of pre-made meals. Store brands where quality is close enough. Powdered milk as backup. Flour as a flexible base. An extra bottle of oil before prices spike. Egg alternatives ready before the headlines begin. None of that is about deprivation. It is about refusing to let the store make your decisions for you. And once you understand that, grocery shopping starts to feel different. Less reactive, less emotional, more deliberate. You stop chasing the illusion that the price on the shelf is always fair, and you start noticing what is actually stable, useful, and worth bringing home. That is where control returns. If this changed the way you think about grocery spending, consider subscribing. And the next time you walk into a store, pay attention to which foods are asking for trust and which ones have actually earned it.